Hello, team. Welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War news update, a live stream update concerning military aid going to Ukraine, going to Russia, what they're building, etc., etc. So much to go through that I have to do a live because it's just too cumbersome for a pre-record. No one would watch it, but when I'm live, it gives you a chance to have a little chat in the live chat appended to the video. So that's all good news, and welcome. Thank you for joining in. It's I don't even know, is it a Sunday night now? My days, I can only kind of tell when my boys aren't at school generally. And yeah, so it's a weekend. It is Sunday night, isn't it? So I've got a cup of tea. I had a couple of my dad's. He made some blackberry gin last year. I don't know whether he's capable of making that this year. He's had a bit of a decline, but last year he made some blackberry gin. Just been having that, watching some Christmas movies, and quite delightful it was too. But I'm back on the tea. You'll be happy to know, which means I should make some kind of sense. Anyway. I guess it's okay to say things like Merry Christmas now. It's that time of year, isn't it? 14th of December. We're kind of in the zone. Right. So Merry Christmas, one and all. We will now get into a bit of discussion of funding first and monies going to Ukraine. We're going to talk about MiG-29s coming from Poland. We're going to talk about what Ukraine is making. We're going to talk about underground factories, and then we're going to talk about what Russia is doing and some of the help they're getting, which is a little bit disturbing. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share if you haven't already done so. All that kind of usual YouTube claptrap, but it does make a difference, I'm told. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it, and it helps you keep in the loop as to what is going on in the world concerning the war in Ukraine and any other topic I decide to have a chat about. Okay, so let's get to it. Let's talk funding, shall we? Because that's exciting, isn't it? Okay, so now we're going to start with Kyiv receiving the least military support from its partners during the entire war in 2025. That's fairly significant, isn't it? European aid has more than halved in that time frame, 4.24 billion in the autumn compared to an average of 9.9 billion the year before. That's coming from Euroactiv. And of course, the Americans have given virtually nothing. They've sold stuff to the Europeans. There's the Pearl Initiative that gets Europeans and other allies buying from American defense companies. But as far as giving aid themselves is concerned, virtually nothing. A little bit on the front end of the year, just before Trump got in January. I think there's been like minimum amounts since, maybe a 50 million tranche from something at some point. There is funding in the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, which is the funding for the American, it's a budget for the American Armed Forces. And actually, they've written in 400 million. We'll come to that for this next year, but we haven't actually seen, I don't think, the amount that they had, that Congress had put in for the previous NDAA either. So interested in what would happen to that. So the US has suspended aid since March and insists that Europe buy American weapons through Pearl, but this is not enough to compensate. According to the Kiel Institute, 2025 could be the worst year in terms of packages. Donors have already provided 32.5 billion euros. Of course, alongside of that, and I don't know how we're talking about military support, if financial support is separate in terms of how they work this out, what you've probably got is a substitution of aid coming in from other countries. I'm trying to be as charitable as possible here to donor countries, but you're probably getting a substitution of aid coming in from other countries with aid built in Ukraine. So more funding is probably going to Ukrainian industry to build that stuff themselves. You think about the FP2 drones that were so effective last night. You think about the Flamingo FP5s and the Luti and stuff like that. That is getting funded with aid from abroad, but it isn't military aid coming from abroad. And that wasn't happening earlier on in the year. Anyway, what is also worth noting, and thank you to Otto Boren here for sending this on. This is a useful Kiel Institute Ukraine aid tracker infographic showing, or chart showing, European military aid allocations and the Nordic 4 versus the Big 5. So I keep talking about how amazing Germany is, and in real terms, it's like the US at the beginning of the war. At the beginning of the war, the US was amazing, and everyone's like, yeah, Biden's kind of stepped up, the US has stepped up in terms of like raw amount of stuff and amount of money. When you work it out per capita in terms of in terms of per capita or as a percentage of GDP, it looks very different. And then, you know, even at the beginning of the war, other allies came out above the US in terms of the aid they give. It's just a smaller country can give less stuff. It has less effect overall. And this is the same with the European aid from Sweden, Denmark, Norway, and Finland. When you look at this, you know, 2025 has been huge for these countries. So although aid has gone down in 2025 as a whole, there are nations like, you know, Germany coming up with the goods, UK coming up with the goods, France actually turning up a little bit more. But as a percentage of pre-war GDP, the Nordic 4 are absolutely smashing it out the park. So congratulations to Sweden, Denmark, Norway, and Finland. Now, the question is, what does that look like in real terms? It's clear that Germany is still ahead of the pack at the moment and doing a fabulous job. Actually, UK doing a fairly good job in real terms too. Now, yeah, so that is a worthwhile graph to give us an understanding. Now, let's go and think about what's going on with the frozen Russian assets. We have another sort of infographic style of representation here of what's going on with frozen Russian assets. Where are Russia's 289.5 billion euros worth of frozen Russian assets? Well, 209 billion of that, or 72.3%, 72% of the frozen Russian assets sit in the EU. Belgium has 62.2% of that. Wow. Germany has 0.21 billion in 0.07%. Luxembourg has 3.5%, or 10 billion of frozen Russian assets secured in Luxembourg. So that's a huge player. That is 3.5%. France, 6.6% with 19 billion. So the French are the next biggest after Belgium. Now, Japan, 9.7% at 28.1 billion euros of frozen Russian assets. Japan are big players. UK as well, 26.6 billion euros, 9.2%. And there's been talk about the UK actually giving some of that, maybe 10 billion pounds worth, something like that, to Ukraine. I think something in that order. We have Canada with 15.1 billion euros, 5.2% of the frozen Russian assets there. So they are a big player. And then you've got Switzerland not in the EU, with 6.2 billion, or 2.1%. The US, very low down on the list there. They have 4.3 billion euros, 1.5% of the frozen Russian assets. So not really a big player in these frozen Russian assets. They are trying to convince Europe to allow the US access to those frozen Russian assets through these kind of agreements that they're working on, so that they can have these post-war investments that the US is a major part of. But I thought that was a really interesting analysis there. It's good to understand actually where everyone sits with regard to these assets. And Belgium, as you can see, really are the big players there. Okay. Moving on, EU countries have agreed to indefinitely freeze, as I've reported before, these frozen Russian assets, clearing the path for a 210 billion euro Ukraine reparations loan, with Hungary and Slovakia expected to oppose, Euractiv reported. Now, this is very important because every 6 months they are having to re-vote on this, and it was always an issue getting Hungary on board, etc., etc. Now that they've sorted it out, that you don't have these 6-month votes, this is a really important move. Some were saying that it annoyed the Americans because they actually might have wanted these assets to be released so that they could get a part of them. I don't know, get Russia on board. There are different rumors flying around. There could have been some meetings cancelled However, it has to be said that Witkoff and I presume Kushner have been meeting today with Zelensky in Berlin in Merz's office. So yeah, that's back on the peace negotiations, or whatever you want to call them, are back in action. Now, I'm not really quite sure. I don't know the provenance of this claim at all. And I don't really know exactly where the Europeans are with regard to frozen Russian assets, and the Bart de Wever and the Belgians, some of the Belgians being quite difficult, and justifiably so, one could argue, with regard to allowing the frozen Russian assets from Euroclear to be used to support Ukraine. You've had Italy then coming on board, and then actually a number of other countries as well. I think Italy, maybe Bulgaria, thrown in there as well. Not sure, and another country being quite skeptical about the Belgian frozen Russian assets. So Ukraine, says Katerina Lisanova, who is a journalist and media advisor at Razon for Ukraine, a former congressional correspondent for Voice of America, former BBC contributor. So she is saying that Ukraine expects to receive, so expects doesn't mean it's going to happen, but expects to receive 40 to 45 billion, most likely euros, the currency is not specified, annually from frozen Russian assets, according to Zelensky. Quote, there are the provenance of this is Zelensky, but this was coming from a WhatsApp press conference today. There are funds our European partners provide based on 30 bilateral agreements. It's crucial for us that this funding does not decrease. I'm personally working on this second. There are frozen assets or alternative instruments tied to frozen assets. I'm working with our European partners to do everything possible to secure 40 to 45 billion annually and 90 billion for the years 2026 to 2027. So that's what Zelensky said. But I don't know the provenance of this, by point of fact that, is this just his hope, or is there some kind of basis in what is likely to happen and what the Europeans are working on? So, loads of caveats applied to this, but for him to say that kind of quasi publicly here, that is, I think, fairly substantial. 40 to 45 billion annually, that would certainly help a lot. And then if we go back to here, that's coming from Europe. If you've got Japan, UK, and Canada able to release more of their frozen assets in a similar way, then Ukraine could be in a much better shape going forward. Now, you've got those 19 billion in France. According to Financial Times, France has declined to include roughly, they say, 18 billion euros in frozen Russian assets kept in her commercial banks in the EU's reparations loan for Ukraine. So these frozen funds represent the second largest block of Russian sovereign reserves in Europe outside of Euroclear, as we saw from that infographic just before. So France really have a big role to play potentially in helping out Ukraine going forward, but they've been a bit coy in what they're going to do with that money, if anything. Now, the EU Council approved the sixth tranche of 2.3 billion euros under the Ukraine facility. So it's another pathway. The financing is mainly aimed at strengthening Ukraine's macro financial stability and supporting public governance. I can't remember if the Ukraine facility is using the profits from the frozen Russian assets. So anyway, I get a bit confused. Apologies. Now, Ukraine has received $290 million from the World Bank. The payment came only after the government hit specific targets. That's opening export markets for small businesses, implementing green financing standards, etc., etc. So, as with an awful lot of the funding going into Ukraine, first of all, it's not just free money. Quite often, these will be loans, long-term loans, and so on and so forth. So they're not receiving like a Christmas present from the World Bank, but also they come with strings attached in terms of what hoops Ukraine has to jump through in order to release that funding, for obvious reasons. Like the EU wants Ukraine to accede by and large to the organization, and therefore to accede to the organization, you need to make sure you've got freedom of press, you've got this, you've got that, you've got lack of you've got transparency, you're tackling corruption, all these kind of things that would apply to every nation acceding to the EU, and they say, look, if you're going to get funding from us, then you're going to need to do all these things that will also help you way to acceding to the EU. World Bank as well wants to advocate for free markets and this and that, so they'll be asking Ukraine to do X, Y, and Z in order to release funding to them. Now, G7 states, the G7 states' readiness to consider confiscation of all frozen Russian assets. So that's interesting, because then we go back to here. Okay, what are the G7 states? So you've got Japan and UK and Canada, as well as arguably aspects of the EU and whatnot. Well, yeah, the EU seem to be on that list of flags there. So we will continue to work together to develop a wide range of ways to financially support Ukraine, including the possible use of all Russian sovereign funds frozen in our jurisdiction until Russia pays reparations. So that would be fantastic. Thank you very much. Now, as mentioned, the US Congress leaders have approved a defense budget that includes $800 million for Ukraine over 2 years, with $400 million allocated for 2026 and the same for 2027. Aimed at extending and expanding military aid, the bill also calls for a review of Russia's military strategy and deployments. In other words, the Congress are trying to work against the Trump administration and their national security strategy. There's this tension that exists between these two entities. Now, the US defense bill proposes, as mentioned, $400 million a year through the next 2 years. Congress is also calling for more frequent reporting of aid provided to Kyiv by its European allies, reflecting Washington's push for Europe to take on a greater share of responsibility for supporting Ukraine. Well, yeah, you might be a little bit embarrassed when that reporting comes through to show that the Europeans really have picked up the lion's share. Okay. BlackRock CEO Larry Fink has entered the economic track of Trump-Ukraine negotiations, a major signal that reconstruction planning is moving into real money and procedures, reports Bloomberg. So I thought I'd add this one in here to do with all the funding. So Zelensky said Fink joined Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Jared Kushner on Wednesday for what he called, quote, the first meeting of the group that will work on a document concerning reconstruction and economic recovery of Ukraine. Fink's return is notable. BlackRock paused its Ukraine Recovery Fund nearly a year ago after Trump's re-election. Before the freeze, the fund was on track to raise $2.5 billion from governments, development banks, and private investors. BlackRock hasn't said whether the fund will now be revived. The White House and Treasury gave no comment, but Fink's presence suggests the administration wants heavyweight financial backing for any settlement. Trump's Ukraine policy relies on a rotating advisory circle. Developer Steve Witkoff leads talks with Putin. Army Secretary Dan Driscoll, although there are claims that Hegseth has sidelined him, works with Kyiv on a new peace plan. Kushner has moved from a sidelines to a central role, and it looks like arguably Marco Rubio has been sidelined. Ukraine is negotiating a 20-point peace plan, plus 2 additional documents, US and European security guarantees, and a joint document on reconstruction and investment. Zelensky says Ukraine is, quote, fully aligned with the American side on the economic principles that Europe will join the reconstruction track. Okay, so that's that. Now, the outgoing Dutch cabinet has allocated an additional 700 million euros in military aid to Ukraine in 2026. So that's amazing. Sourced from unspent budgets at the Ministries of Defense, 500 million, and Foreign Affairs, 200 million. I'd love to have that kind of budget. Oh, it turns out I haven't spent that much on groceries this month. 50 million quid. Nice. The funds were freed up due to delays in defense projects and favorable exchange rates. Oh, interesting. Won't affect my groceries purchases, unfortunately. After Germany had already announced 2 investments via the Pearl mechanism, 500 mil and 150 mil plus, in terms of euros spent to be spent through the US. Germany's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Vardefuhl, today pledged a further 200 million, which are to be allocated to the benefit of Ukraine through 2 Pearl packages. In addition, Germany will contribute, and I said this last time, a further 25 million to the CAP framework, etc., etc. So, Germany really are adding more and more. Now, I spoke to you about this before, but there's some addendums. So another 25 million for winter gear and medical care. So upon inquiry, says German aid to Ukraine, the Federal Foreign Office just told me that $200 million announced on the 3rd of December already include the 150 million euros. I don't know if that's relevant, like the difference in currency there, announced by Minister of Defense Pistorius in mid-November. Germany's contribution to the Pearl mechanism thus rises to $700 million. Addendum 2, I just got some additional info, which I'll share later this week or next week in a new article dedicated on Germany's contribution. Currently, he's though too ill to speak about that. So keep an eye on German Aid to Ukraine's website, deaidua.org. And then you can go and check out what he is finding out with regard to what Germany is helping Ukraine with. Latvia is allocating 200 million to 100.5 million euros in 2026 for air defense and 50 million euros for unmanned aerial vehicle development. The investment comes amid warnings from military and intelligence sources that a Russian attack on Europe could occur as early as 2028. So they're all getting rather jittery, as you can imagine, in Eastern Europe. Latvia finds another 5 million euros for drones for Ukraine by the end of this year. So that is 16 days. Latvian authorities intend to redirect another 5 mil from the budget program for MIA for 2025, which provided for the country's contribution to the European peace mechanism. So that's all good news there. And finally, on funding, Robert Fico, the Slovakian Egypt in charge, says, I cannot support, and under no pressure will I support, any solution to support Ukraine's military spending in which the Slovak Republic should participate. At the same time, I respect the sovereign right of each member state of the European Union to adopt a different solution on a voluntary basis. So that's what he is saying. Okay, now on to what's going on with aid to Ukraine in terms of actual military equipment, where we're going to be talking about, of course, MiG-29s amongst other things. Right. I just want to say a big thank you to people supporting the channel. Thank you to Bubzala, who says JP is the hardest working man on YouTube. It is an obsession, and the problem is I collect all this data, and I get to this point where it's a sunk cost fallacy, where I'm like, well, I've collected it, I've got to do it now. I can't just, if it's on my list, like I use my phone an awful lot, collect the data throughout the day, doing everything around the house. I'm always like attaching my phone, collecting the data, and then it has to come out. I'm like, well, I've got to talk about that now. My son is watching Jingle All the Way, the old 1996 Schwarzenegger film. I'm like, yeah, I've seen that before. I'm not too good at unless it's a cult film. I'm not too good at watching films I've already watched before. I'm like, well, I've already watched it. Unless it's with Nell and I or something, real cult-like film, I'll take myself out. I'm like, right, now's the time to watch this, to do this video. So yeah, but thank you, Bubazala. Yes, words difficult. Richard Bennett, good to have you on board, mate. Thank you very much for your ATP Geopolitics memberships there. Really appreciate that. And thank you so much to F-Oink with his Hungarian Florence. Watch out for Hungary at the moment. I think they're still protesting today. I'm not sure, but protests in Hungary are huge at the moment. I did my live stream last night, which is covered loads of bases last night, but particularly what's going on in Bulgaria, Hungary, and Georgia, and huge protests that are really significant. And so, Orban could be under a lot of pressure in Hungary. Anyway, for the Ukrainian Wine Replenishment Fund, thank you very much. It is a very active fund, that. So thank you, F-Oink. Right. Yeah, stuff like the Blues Brothers film, I could watch that time and time again. Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, just seeing what you're up to in the live chat here. Okay, right, let's move on to back to where I was actually. And where am I going? I'm going to the right hand side now, moving to the right. No, left hand side. I don't even know my left to the right, left and the right. Goodness me, words, they're becoming difficult. I need more tea. Okay, let's now move to Andrew Perpetua, who has this to say. And he says, frankly, I think the fastest way to end the war in Ukraine is not by sending tanks or by idiotic peace proposals. And I did share this with you in this morning's Hits and Losses video, but I think it's so on point. It's exactly what I've been saying for years now. The fastest way is to set up factories across Europe to produce 1,000 to 2,000 long-range strike drones per day and launch hundreds, if not thousands, of drones into Russia every single day until the country collapses. This is like, I'm not a religious person. Yeah, I'm an atheistic philosopher of religion by trade, by all my books and blogs and articles, and I've ended up commenting on geopolitics over the last 3 years plus, but 4 years. But amen, brother. Amen. Yeah, 100%. It's all about scale. Like I said this morning, you had 200 FP2 drones every night hitting the near rear up to 200 kilometers from the front line, and the Russian army just gets obliterated. Logistics, depots, equipment, just troop accumulations, oil depots, and then you've got refineries and all that kind of stuff getting struck with the long range missiles and drones. It is just about scale of distance munitions, because like I've said to you ad infinitum, you don't lose Ukrainian troops by sending missiles and drones into Russia or occupied territories. This is the most effective way to trick the Russians. You're not sending 1,000 Ukrainian troops against 5,000 Russian troops. You're obliterating their logistics and taking out the troops with massive. These missiles and drones act as aviation, really. So 1,000 to 2,000 long-range strike drones per day, hundreds, if not thousands, of drones into Russia every single day until the country collapses. If they think sending 500 drones into Ukraine is a threat, see how they respond with 3,000 drones flying into Russia. I don't know why Europe and the US and every ally of Ukraine and Ukraine themselves just didn't work night and day to make sure this happened. Like 500 Shaheds a day, let's assume that from a Russian point of view. And we're going to hear later that they're moving up the warheads. They're putting 2 warheads on Shaheds to go, and they're both 100 kilograms each. So that's a 200 kilogram. That's a half decent cruise missile. Shaheds are becoming cruise missiles. So if they're sending 1 to 200, but up to 500 and 600 cruise missiles effectively into Ukraine a day, Ukraine have to answer that. They have to answer that with better, more accurate and more missiles and drones of their own. Andrew Perpetua's absolutely on the money here. With this many drones, you can hammer every single factory, power plant, substation, oil refinery, and mine in Russia relentlessly. Europe had a 1 million drone program to supply 1 million FPV drones. Screw FPV drones. Have a 1 million drone program to supply 1 million strike drones. That's your 1 million drones. It would save Europe money too, spending like 3, 4, 5 billion euros crushing Russia's infrastructure. Is a lot cheaper than spending tens of billions propping up Ukraine. Just that all day long. That, Andrew. Yes. But I have to say, I did say that about 3 years ago. Right. Ukraine will receive around $5 billion worth of military equipment from US stockpiles. Now, it's interesting. I would need to check this because there's no reports saying it, taking it. I don't know where from. Stockpiles is very different from building them. So this is the difference between Presidential Drawdown Authority and USAI funding. The 2 funding streams previously for the US, which would be like the US would spend either money or not spend money, because actually it was the worth of the value of the stockpiles or the equipment that was in American stockpiles that they'd send to Ukraine, the kind of book value, which is always interesting in itself in terms of aid that they were giving, was given this value. And actually, these were often obsolete weapons that really didn't have that value, but the book value was there. Then they don't have to decommission the equipment. They just send it to Ukraine. But anyway, that aside, you send those stockpiles and then Ukraine will get them instantaneously, or you spend that money on putting orders in for maybe new Pack 2 and Pack 3 missiles from Lockheed Martin or whatever. And then, HIMARS, Gimler's missiles or whatever. If the Pearl Initiative is getting stuff from stockpiles, and that's interesting. So it means that they can get it really quickly, and that's clearly what they have been doing, because some of the Pearl stuff came pretty much straight away when they're starting to put this Pearl Initiative together. So these stockpiles, by the end of the year, Ukraine will have received $5 billion worth of equipment from the US through the Pearl system, including air defense systems, ammunition, critical spare parts. Funding will come from EU allies, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. Now, the Czech initiative has been really successful. Petr Fiala, who's no longer the prime minister, he's the outgoing prime minister, said, I promise to deliver 1.8 million pieces of large caliber ammunition to Ukraine's defenders this year. I am glad to confirm that we have fulfilled this goal today, he said yesterday. And the Czech president, Petr Pavel, who still is in place, says the Czech Republic has delivered all 1.8 million rounds of ammunition pledged to Ukraine. He made the statement amid discussions among parties forming the next Czech government about potentially revisiting their support for Ukraine. So fingers crossed Petr Pavel can persuade the incoming government, who is not pro-Ukraine in any way, shape, or form, can convince them that that is something that Czechia would want to continue, possibly because it props up Czech industries in order to do so. Now, talking about Czech industry, a Czech company is to supply cruise missiles with a 680-kilometer range to Ukraine. So the Czech company LPP plans to start mass production of its new Narwhal cruise missile soon. It plans to produce hundreds of missiles per year. So, of course, that's hundreds per year is probably at most one a day. But that's great. That's better than hot poker up the backside. So, yeah, hundreds of missiles per year for the first 2 years. However, before mass production begins, the company wants to deploy the missiles in combat to obtain combat-proven certification. In January and February, it will supply Ukraine with its Narwhal cruise missiles with a single task: to strike the Russians, according to LPP co-owner Radim Petras. In an interview with Aktualne, LPP has no critical suppliers. They manufacture everything themselves, from the airframe to the composite, autopilot, and jet engines. LPP developed the warhead itself and is manufactured by, and it is manufactured by another Czech company, Zvezda. So it developed the warhead, then that gets manufactured by another Czech. So that's amazing. So it won't rely on, say, European or American, other countries to provide any kind of tech or components. That's absolutely brilliant. Now, we've got a bit of detail on this weapon. Czech journalists praised the Steph. In January to February 2026, it will deliver, LPP will deliver a trial batch of the new Narwhal cruise missiles to Ukraine. Before mass production, the company wants to get combat proven certification. As mentioned, the warhead is up to 120 kilograms. So let's think about that. FP2 drone, drone with a 200-kilometer range has a 105 kilogram warhead. The Iskander has about a 400 to 500 kilogram warhead. So this is a small cruise missile, but it does have, well, it's got a range that is going to be fairly useful, 680 kilometers. It's 4 meters in length, 2.6 meter wingspan, and goes 750 kilometers an hour. Now, I would like to know how much what the price tag is on this, because I presume this would be bought by the Ukrainians rather than supplied by the Czech government, for example. Could be bought by any other government to assist Ukraine, of course. I would hope it's a cheap, one of the cheaper end cruise missiles. Obviously, I hope everything that Ukraine gets is cheap so they can get more of it. But that's really, really good news. Thank you to the great Cheryl Watley, who says atpgeo.com/donate. Please remember, we are having a fundraiser for Jigger's Port at the moment, the 80th Air Assault Brigade. Okay, over 2,000 Rochelle Senator armored vehicles have been delivered to Ukraine since the start of the full-scale invasion. So, if I remember correctly, the guy that owns Rochelle is a Canadian, Israeli Canadian, whose wife is Ukrainian. Is that correct? And they employ loads of refugee Ukrainians and diaspora community Ukrainians in Canada to build these, and then they're getting built in Ukraine now as well, I think. And they provided 2,000, and they started off with just the kind of armored vehicles. The Ukrainians started using them in ways that probably wasn't appropriate, because they weren't like MRAP level armored, mine resistant ambush protection vehicles. So things exploding under them, or even drones hitting them on the outside. They were initially, these were built on the Ford chassis. Is it the Ford F-150 chassis? And they essentially, Rochelle started as a company making armored vehicles for like money from banks and whatnot, that kind of armored vehicle. And then they got them to Ukraine, and obviously that's not good enough for like a war zone, but it's fine for like transporting people, maybe, like a Humvee type thing, like a light Humvee transporting people behind the lines. But then they started producing the MRAP version, and they've got all these different versions now as they've moved in much more formally into the defense sector, I guess, Rochelle. So they've delivered 2,000 of these, probably of all the different varieties, according to the company head, Roman Shimonov. The Canadian-made vehicles are a backbone of Ukraine's mobility, used for troop transport, logistics, medevac, and high-risk missions. So all of those different types there. That's brilliant, though, and that's why you see senators on the loss list quite often, because they just have an absolute bunch of these. Now, having said that, Humvees, the more than 2,000 Humvees have been given, but then the US has an app. What is it? Does it have 144,000 Humvees? Something like that. No, maybe even more. Maybe it's like 230,000. So they've got a ridiculous amount of Humvees, and of course, they are being gradually kind of replaced Humvees. And so the US has a lot of scope to give Humvees to Ukraine, and they did give an awful lot of them. So here is what the Humvee or one variant looks like, and I guess that's just being constantly developed by the manufacturers over time, to make sure it's fit for purpose, and they get all that feedback from the front lines and whatnot. Okay. And now we're on to the kind of headline thing of the MiG-29s. Now, you already know this because I reported this previously, but this is it in the context of the military aid video. Poland's general staff has confirmed talks with Ukraine are underway to transfer MiG-29 jets. The aircraft are being phased out due to reaching their service limits, and there are no upgrades available or on the cards. In exchange, Poland seeks access to Ukrainian drone and missile tech to boost joint defense and industrial capabilities. So this could be a case of like, we've got, and it turns out it's going to be about 14 to 15 MiG-29s we can get you. You probably don't want to be buying these off us. And actually, we want to help you out as much as possible. We want something back. So what can you give back? So it's more like an abstract payment in terms of military tech, that know-how of drone tech, electronic warfare, maybe missile tech that you're maybe 5 points or whoever it is can help the Polish out with, and in turn will get you 14 to 15 of these aircraft. So General Staff of the Polish Army released this. We are pleased to inform you that negotiations are underway with Ukraine regarding the transfer of MiG-29 aircraft. The transfer of the aircraft is based on the aircraft reaching their target, operational life, and the lack of prospects for their further modernization within the Polish armed forces. We also inform you that a final decision has not yet been made. The aircraft donation will be part of the alliance's policy of supporting Ukraine and maintaining the security of NATO's eastern flank. The tasks of the withdrawn MiG-29 aircraft will be performed by F-16 and FA-50 aircraft. Simultaneously, in connection with the transfer of the aircraft, talks are underway with Ukraine regarding the provision of selected drone and missile technologies to Poland. The goal is not only to compensate Poland for the loss of the equipment, but above all to acquire and jointly develop new defense and industrial competency. So, strings attached there, as you can well imagine. So it's thought that this is a negotiation over 14 to 15 of these MiG-29s, Soviet-era jets that Warsaw no longer needs, especially as it has F-16s, F-35s, South Korean FA-50s. For the Ukraine, these 1980 jets are a lifeline, though. It lost 31 MiGs since February. It has lost 31 since February 2022. And the bigger Su-27s are slowly disappearing with no replacement. One of them was lost recently, wasn't it? Poland wants Ukrainian drones and missile technology in exchange. 3 years of war have turned Ukraine into a world leader in combat drones, and Warsaw wants in on that expertise. It's not a charity, but trade. Old jets Ukraine can fly tomorrow for cutting-edge tech Poland can build on for years. So that seems like a good exchange there. Now, it then turned out that Nawrocki, the Polish president, he's not opposed to Ukraine, but he's aligned with a more kind of Eurosceptic approach to Poland's politics, and he hates Russia, but also he's anti-Ukrainian nationalism. He's kind of this historian guy he's got an amateur boxer and historian and all sorts, Nawrotsky. But he can be a bit prickly with Ukraine, but essentially he doesn't like Russia either. So there was this worry that he could pivot Poland away from supporting Ukraine as much as they previously were. But Nawrotsky reacted to the Minister of National Defence's words about plans to hand over the remaining MiG-29 fighters to Ukraine. Quote, there must be have been some misunderstanding. I didn't have that information. So he's like complaining he knew nothing about this. And that could well be because he might try and stop it for one reason or another. Anyway, there you go. Okay, moving on to Italy. Giorgia Meloni will deliver generators to Ukraine in response to more Russian attacks on homes and energy systems. But Italy's foreign minister had earlier said joining NATO's weapons purchase plan. So that's the Pearl initiative that I presume was premature. So we understand that Italy is not supporting the Pearl initiative, saying that there's no point doing that if ceasefire negotiations are underway, that kind of thing. A new truckload with 11 tons of Breton fishing nets. So these are from the French area of Brittany, where you've got this big culture of fishing there. They've been providing nets to Ukraine to make camouflage net. Well, no, anti-drone nets, I think, to hang up around logistics areas to stop drones getting into into these road networks. So Breton fishing nets, 11 tons of them have arrived in Ukraine to help protect against Russian drones. The nets will be used on the front lines to shield troops and infrastructure. So that's absolutely fabulous there. And that's this organization called Koenig Solidarity, which Koenig, I presume, is to do with the Breton people up there, a bit like Cornwall, which is Kernel. So Cornwall is in the west coast of the UK, for those who are not aware. We have we have two West Country counties, Cornwall and Devon, right? And they both have quite distinct culture. And Kernel or Cornwall, Kernel is has occasionally you see like stickers on cars for like Cornish independence, and it's this thread that has run through West Country kind of history for some time, whereby there's talk of independence, a bit like sort of Welsh or Scottish independence. You've got Cornish independence. That's highly unlikely, of course, but it's there. And the same with Breton. The Koenig Solidarity. I mean, this is probably wouldn't like being associated. They would much rather this is Breton support rather than French support, if you like. That's my thought anyway. I assume Koenig there is to do, you got that similarity, like you got Mont Saint Michel and Mount Saint Michael in Cornwall, haven't you? You've got Mont Saint Michel, and they're both these kind of mounds with these little towns built on top of them. That are quite famous. But anyway, there are these real similarities between Cornwall and Brittany, Breton. So anyway, just thought I'd throw that one in there. Okay. So yeah, I mean, please don't take that as a given in terms of history and linguistics, because I'm just, that's off the top of my head, so it could be absolutely awful. Oh, Cheryl, my heritage, Devon and Cornwall. It is beautiful down that neck of the woods. The West Country is a delight in the UK. Right, then we hear this. Well, not hear this. We see this. There's a picture that came out of an Augusta Westland AW109 in service with the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Painted, rather similar paint job to the Black Hawks there. And no one really knows where it's come from. And indeed, whether they have more of them. So these are lightweight twin-engine 8-seat multi-purpose helicopters designed and initially produced by the Italian rotorcraft manufacturer Augusta. It was the first all-Italian helicopter to be mass-produced. Its production has been continued by Augusta's successor companies, presently Leonardo, formerly Augusta Westland, merging blah, blah, blah. So its primary users, Italian Army, South African Air Force, Royal New Zealand Air Force, Royal Malaysian, blah, 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 blah. Lots of countries use this, and there are lots of variants of them. But you're wondering where these have come from. Then you look at the former users, Argentina, Australia, Italy themselves, Paraguay, even the UK. Army, Air Corps, and the Royal Air Force, US Coast Guard, Venezuela, not going to come from Venezuela, Poland as well in terms of air ambulances, Paraguay. You know, where did these come from, or did this come from? Don't know how many they have, but anyway, it's always fun spotting bits of tech coming from who knows where and wondering where was that from. But they have at least one of these AW109s. Okay, now I did talk to you about this in a Hits and Knotted video some time back, but yeah, somebody saying I love the links, the Westland links. So I made, when I was a kid and a geeky kid making airfix models, I made an airfix model of the Westland links, actually, a naval one, in navy blue. So yeah, what else did I'm sure I made a Mosquito, and did I make a Lancaster? There was no, it wasn't. It was a de Havilland something. Messerschmitt 109E. Yeah, those were the days. I was thinking, because I'm quite, this is random aside, because I'm quite geeky, and you get to a point where you're old enough, you're like, I can do what I want now type thing. Like if I want to buy a Lego set and build one, I can do that. If I want to buy an airfix model, I can do that. Actually, my partner's dad, Ivan, who always brings in a cup of tea, he gave us a bunch of airfix models for the boys to do, and they're not at all interested, sadly. But I was thinking, oh, I'd love to just sit and make them now, and I'm really frustrated because I can't feel my fingers. That's why I always do typos when I try to type. I can't feel my fingers. I always drop things because of my multiple sclerosis, and I just wouldn't be able to. There's no feedback loop, and I just wouldn't be able to make models or do anything with my fingers. And I'm like, oh, that's really sad, because I'd love to just geek out and make an airfix model of something. But yeah, I just wouldn't be able to do it. I know I wouldn't be. Like, you should see me try and pick up like small screws to put into, like, you know, we've got a Ring doorbell and having to charge it occasionally. Like, you have to take out little screws. The other day I was doing that, and I was like dropping them like 50 times because I've got no like knowledge of I got 2 teaspoons out earlier, 2, so I couldn't feel, just went in the drawer to get a teaspoon out to make a cup of tea, and I was like, oh, and then put them in. Oh no, I've got 2 teaspoons, because I can't feel to put my hands in my pocket to get keys. I can't feel what I'm feeling in my pockets. And honestly, like, life is really, really challenging when you can't feel your fingers. You don't realize how much you use a feeling on your fingers all the time. And yet, weirdly, they're temperature hypersensitive. So if I touch a really hot or like a medium hot thing, I'm like, ah. So they're temperature sensitive, but feeling insensitive. And anyway, that was all to do with someone mentioning the fact that they just mentioned Westland links. Anyway, let's get back to, no one wants to know about that. So let's get back to talking about Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk issued a satellite picture which was produced by a Polish satellite. Poland has recently launched its first sovereign military reconnaissance satellite system featuring the PIAST, Polish Imaging Satellites Constellation, which is not optical satellite constellation, and a microsar radar as well. So this produces, obviously, decent images, marking a significant leap from data consumer to independent provider. So rather than consuming other people's kind of satellite data, they're now providing it, enabling real-time all-weather surveillance for defense and state security with full national control. This satellite system is also supporting Ukraine in its defense against Russian invasion. That last throwaway sentence there is incredibly important, because if they are providing satellite assistance to Ukraine, then that's going to help fill in the gap left, or potentially being left, by the Americans, as they are going to want Europe to do more and more. But also, if they threaten to pull out of supporting Ukraine entirely, then they're going to stop providing insanely important satellite imagery and whatnot. So interesting. Try putting the airfix in a freezer so you can feel the parts putting them together. Interesting. So that's so with my MS, heat is really important. And actually, if I'm hot, it's ridiculous we keep going to hot countries on holiday because it makes my MS way worse. They used to diagnose people with MS by putting them in a hot bath and seeing if their symptoms got worse. That was literally the diagnostics for MS. So yeah, putting them in a freezer, like when it's colder, if I'm out, actually, I can feel slightly better in my fingers when it's colder. So yeah, that's interesting. Interesting that you mentioned that. Anyway, right. So we are now going to look at something that isn't necessarily anything to do with Ukraine, at least prima facie here, but in principle, this is what Ukraine will be working on and possibly already doing. So this is a drone swarm strike tested by an American company called Auterion, specializing in autonomous systems. This is only a 3-second video, but just check out what drone swarms are capable of. Now, imagine that these drones have warheads on. I presume none of these drones have warheads, and that is an inflatable tank there. Imagine these are warheads, and they are hitting a real tank. And you've got, what, 7 drones there autonomously hitting a tank, which means that no one's flying those drones. They are targeting that tank themselves and then flying into it, and then add warheads onto that and put that in a war environment, and you've got some interesting stuff going on there. And I assume we're going to be seeing, so it may be happening at the moment with Ukraine. Like, we are privileged, I guess, as observers of a war, in terms of seeing so much footage coming out of the war on a daily basis. So I reported to you last night that Ukraine had apparently struck A, B, and C, right? And I released my hits and losses video, and then the minute I released it, there were 2 videos that came out showing A, B, and C getting struck by FP2 drones. That happened last night, and already the Primari unit had released a video, or the 2 videos were out. And I'm like, holy crap! So that's when I produced a subsequent video just showing you those videos. But like, we are seeing things get reported. Last night this happened, and then a couple of hours later, you've got videos of that happening, and we're just sitting back and we're observing this war in all its gory detail. But there will be things that we don't see, because Ukraine will be like, yeah, we ain't releasing that because that is sensitive. But it might well be happening. So there might well be drone swarms. We understand that Ukraine has actually tested up to 100 drones being swarmed, and regularly 25 drone swarms. That's what I've reported something like 3 months ago. I don't know. I'm kind of guessing now. And I assume that they've been working on that since then, but we're not going to be seeing footage of that, because they're like, yeah, we ain't releasing that because we don't want the Russians finding out about how that works, and we don't want, actually, we want to keep certain things OPSEC secret. So yeah, be interesting to see what they are using. Right, okay, getting back into it. Oh, it's a bit of Benny Pie. Good to have you on board, Benny. Drone swarm tech is advancing faster than anti-drone swarm tech. Interesting. So he's obviously done a little bit of a looky-see into that. Okay. Right. Lots of people talking about this. So I just watched, says Tom Fernby, Preston Stewart, the Dubai drone conference. Very cool stuff there. I bet there are all sorts of stuff that is just is on the verge of, or is being used or already. Yeah, just pretty incredible. Okay. Right, it's just getting sucked into the live chat then. Right. Stay on target, Pearce. Stay on target. Tractor beams and all that. Right. No, the tractor beam was inside the Death Star, wasn't it? It was stay on target. It was when he was flying down that sort of Death Star canyon, if you like. Okay, I'm interrupting myself with references to Star Wars. Shut up, Pearce. 3 lies in 20 seconds. Classic Trump world. So Trump said, just off, I could play you this 18 seconds of Trump. But anyway, Trump you can imagine what he said, that he's given $350 billion to Ukraine and javelins, etc., etc. So there's a corrective here, and I'm including this in the military aid because I want to just highlight a video I've done previously. So one, Trump didn't give javelins to Ukraine. Ukraine paid for them in full stop. Those javelins couldn't hit a single Russian tank because Trump administration forced Ukraine to store them in the west of the country, nowhere near the front. That was a condition of the sale. I didn't know about this, and I'm going to talk about this in a little bit more detail. And no, Biden didn't hand Ukraine $350 billion. The actual support is under $100 billion in aid, which is still about $100 billion more than Trump ever backed. Trump's Ukraine policy amounted to exactly zero. And community notes on what Trump is saying here. And I get fed up with Trump in public lying, but also I have had to deal with many people on this channel saying, well, Trump gave javelins, you know, and Obama only gave this. And I have to point out to them that this is disinformation. Well, does he know what he's talking about? Misinformation. Who knows? Just to remind people, I've done a video on this to give you the full details and bring the receipts. Trump didn't give javelins to Ukraine in the way people understand. John McCain and Congress got together and said, we need to up aid to Ukraine. This is back, 2014 onwards, but back in sort of 2016, 17 time. And Congress put together a bill that gave more aid to Ukraine. It wasn't Trump that gave aid to Ukraine. What Trump did, it wasn't Trump that gave javelins to Ukraine. It was Congress. And Trump tried to stop it. That's why he was impeached, right? Because he said, Zelensky, you're not getting these javelins, which Congress want to give to you. You're not getting them unless you give me dirt on Biden. And the claim here is actually wasn't given. They were paid for in full. And that's what got Trump impeached, right? Or the attempt to impeach him. But I didn't realize that actually the javelins were stored in the west of the country, nowhere near the front. And that was a condition of the sale. I didn't know about that. So I need to look into that. But I just need people to be aware that Trump keeps talking about how Obama only gave sheets to Ukraine and Trump gave javelins. Trump didn't give javelins. Congress gave javelins, particularly John McCain. And Trump tried to stop them. That is a super important correction to the misinformation that is out there concerning javelins. And people who like to say that Trump is amazing. So if you're a Trump supporter, you want to support him and say how amazing he is. And if you're a Trump hater like myself, you're probably looking for how to slag off Trump. So I need to be careful that I don't get involved in confirmation bias. But I did the research on this. I've got a video on this. The reality is that, well, if you ever hear someone, or if you are one of these people that says, well, Trump gave javelins, you are wrong, or you need to correct whoever is making that claim. Trump didn't give javelins. Congress did. Trump tried to stop them and use them as blackmail. And I need to check this, but one claim is that they had to go to the West and couldn't be used. And that was I don't know what the point of giving them then or selling them then would be. Anyway, it is, you need to correct that if people make these claims. Anyway, let's get back to what I was talking about. Okay. So as someone says, all the javelins on the front lines were not from the US. Wow. I mean, that is even worse than I'd initially thought. That's incredible. The UK, says Mick Riley, quickly sent Javelin missiles and NLAWs with initial deliveries of thousands of units by mid-2022. Yeah, we certainly did do that when the war started. We were big on that. Anyway, right. Thank you, though, for chipping in, guys. Neutral and poorly armed Ireland, long viewed as Europe's blind spot, announced Thursday it will spend 1.7 billion euros on improved military equipment, capabilities and facilities to deter drones and potential Russian sabotage of undersea cables. This is big, and this is going to be partly in response to those drones that were circling around the trajectory of, or the route of, Zelensky's plane as it's coming into land in Ireland recently, except it was ahead of schedule and landed 5 minutes earlier. And then the drones went to where the plane should have been. And people are wondering, A, who was controlling the drones? What were they planning on doing? Were they planning on smashing into the plane? What were they? Anyway, Irish have come out and said, well, we think they are Russian drones. And this is probably in response to that. But also, it's worth knowing that the British, although there's this, I guess, historical animosity between Ireland and Britain, Northern Ireland, etc., but our Royal Air Force does a lot of protecting of Irish airspace, and our Royal Navy does a lot of protecting of Irish maritime space. And there's a, as part of agreements we have with them, and that's all good and well, but Ireland are recognizing, I think at the moment, they probably need to up the ante a little bit with what they do. So quote here, and this is all coming from Irish Times. The drone initiative will represent the first component of an overall military radar program, likely to be the most expensive defense project in the history of the Irish state, and which the government wants to be fully in place by 2028. It is understood that the undercurrent plans, a single counter unmanned aerial battery would be deployed to the airbase at Baldonnel in West Dublin, with a number of foreign leaders expected to visit Ireland in the second half of 2026. They obviously want to make sure that they are secure there. So that's interesting. Okay. And God, lots of people adding lots of really good stuff in the live chat. Looks like the UK public are starting to realize the seriousness of the situation we are in and a need for rearmament, a short thread on where the whole of society conversation on defense has to go next. Understand the threat is real. So this is Paul Mason, who's a Labour guy. Sky News reporting that the Armed Forces Minister says the UK is rapidly developing plans to prepare for war. So just to end this section, there is this, and that's why the Irish bit, and then moving on to here, is that we recognise that Russia is a threat in Europe, and Europe is tooling up. You've got Germany massively arming themselves, rearming themselves. You've got other nations, Poland, very heavily involved in this. Paul Mason says the national security strategy spells it out. There's a possibility of war with Russia if it wins in Ukraine. This is the British national security strategy. And Russia is hiking hybrid aggression to dangerous levels. Any UK politician who ignores or denies this should be stigmatized. Deterrence works. All the nuclear level, it has worked since 1945 at the nuclear level. But to match a current threat, we need greater conventional and sub-strategic deterrence. Combined with economic resilience, we need to show Putin he cannot win. The trade-offs are not binary. Welfare, not warfare, is a pathetic piece of self-deception. We can only afford the NHS and welfare system because bondholders see our country as safe and secure. Resilience has to be the job of everyone in society. We have duties to each other as well as rights. That means countering disinformation, fostering trust in democratic institutions, and protecting ourselves from gig economy sabotage. Finally, the left has to turn up. We have unique points to make about defense, the need for ethics in research, the need for social rootedness and enhanced rights for forces members, and maintenance of the laws of war. We now have an MP in Parliament who wants to quit NATO, and a Green Party leader who wants to give up our nuclear weapons. Cui bono, Putin. Fight the Putinists on both extremes and stand together to defend our country against aggression. Okay, so that is an interesting position from a leftist Labour. So I'd say he's not a politician, but associated with the left there, Paul Mason. Interesting. Okay, now going on to what Ukraine is doing indigenously. Max25 here reports that Russia knows where exactly in Ukraine the Flamingo missiles are produced. Quote, this is from the Firepoint. So FP2s, FP1s, FP5s, Flamingos, new FP7s and 9s coming online. Russia knows where exactly in Ukraine the Flamingo missiles are produced. Quote, there have already been 2 large strikes on our workshops, said Firepoint technical director. That leads me on to this piece in the Euromaidan press. Ukraine builds underground arms factories as Russia targets defense plants with guided bombs. Ukraine is constructing underground defense manufacturing facilities and relocating weapons production from regions under constant Russian guided bomb attacks, the defense ministry announced, as the country received $35 million in state funding to restore strike damaged facilities. So Ukraine's defense industry received over 1.5 billion hryvnias, $35 million in state support to restore operations damaged by Russian strikes, according to the defense ministry. Quote, Ukrainian defense industrial complex is steadily increasing its capabilities, and the share of domestic weapons in supplies in the defense forces continues to grow. That's what I said earlier. They're moving from buying or getting given more stuff, or the amount of stuff they were getting given from, say, allies, Europe, US, whoever, to building more of that stuff themselves and maybe getting the funding for that from abroad. The ministry updated its funding mechanism for war-damaged enterprises this summer, enabling rapid disbursement of recovery funds. The changes of government-to-government regulations now allow budget resources to support defense industry development, technology implementation, and production capacity expansion. Ukraine is developing a comprehensive emergency plan to ensure defense enterprises can operate under current conditions. The core element involves relocating or duplicating facilities of the most critical defense plants. The ministry is prioritizing moves from areas where Russia actively uses guided aerial bombs, which pose constant production risks. Construction of underground manufacturing complexes is underway to provide protected, continuous military equipment production. The ministry emphasized these measures aim to ensure long-term resilience of Ukraine's defense industry and maintain frontline supplies regardless of enemy attack intensity. The European Union recently approved a program to support Ukraine's defense industry and integrate it with the bloc's defense sector. So that's all happening. That's super, super important. But you're also seeing the production of equipment outside of Ukraine, and we'll come to that later. In fact, no, it's probably a good time to bring this in here. Where do we have it? I think it's this one. No, it's not. Where are you? Oh, I can't find it now. Oh well, I did have another thing to say. Here it is. Okay. So Ukrainian Miltech company Ukreспec Systems, which manufactures drones, is investing £200 million in a new factory in Mildenhall, that's in Suffolk. That's the East Anglia, on the east of the nation, where it will manufacture products that have proven themselves in the battlefield in Ukraine. So, and that looks rather like an FP1 there. Interesting. Or similar. Anyway, Ukraine is also building stuff outside of Ukraine, not just having companies build it under license, but actually building their own facilities, such as we have seen with the solid rocket fuel manufacturing facility for Firepoint in Denmark, and then you've got this company set up in the UK. So that also makes it safe, or relatively safe, for Ukraine, as in these companies aren't going to be hit by Russian ballistic missiles, you would hope. Ukraine's defense industry is working to localize production of S-300 and S-400 based systems to eventually integrate them with European radars. Firepoint's chief designer, Dennis Stillerman, told the BBC, while synchronization is underway, Ukraine is using the S-300 based FP7 as a ballistic missile. So that's interesting. The FP7 ballistic missile they have coming is apparently based on the surface-to-air missile that the Russians have developed, that the Ukrainians also use. The Russians use that, remember, themselves in ground attack mode. So the S-300, S-400 surface-to-air missile systems get thrown into Ukraine. They are ballistic missiles effectively, and they're very difficult to shoot down, and also they're being shot from relatively close as well. So the FP7 apparently is being based on that system. Just to remind you, FP1 is a Ukrainian drone that looks a little bit like that, a bit like the Luti drone, and that is a long distance. It's 1,600 kilometers. It has, is it a 30 kilogram a warhead? So it's got a smaller warhead because it has to go further, so it has to have much more space taken up with fuel. That's 1,600 kilometers or something like that, 30 kilograms, bosh. Then you have the FP2, which probably looks very similar to that, but instead of fuel, it has more warhead. So that has a 200-kilometer range. So it's an eighth of the range, but it has a 105 kilogram warhead. Wow. Okay, so that packs a punch. That's the FP2. I don't know about FP3 or 4. Missed them out. We get to FP5. That's a Flamingo. Big old, massive cruise missile that has a range, an impressive 3,000 kilometer range, so they say. Don't know that it's been used to that extent, and it has a 1,150 kilogram warhead. That is a phenomenal size of warhead. So that packs a huge punch. Then you've got the FP7, which is coming online soon-ish. That is looks like this. By the end of the year, we hope to codify the FP7 ballistic missile. The chief designer of Firepoint says, if there's a request and there's money, somewhere from May, we can switch to mass serial production of missiles, hundreds per month, he predicts. So that's hundreds per month. Let's say 200 or maybe 300 divided by 30 days. That's going to give you 10 a day. Wow. So, but that's somewhere in May, right? And if there's a ceasefire by then they're not going to be able to use all of them. But anyway, that's the FP7. That's a ballistic missile that has the, well, actually, let's look at this image and we can go through all that we know. So range looks like 200-kilometer range there. It's a 14-meter circle error probable. I think that is. So the accuracy about 14 meters. Is that a kilogram warhead, 150-kilogram warhead? So that's not a huge warhead, but I guess they're going to make it, is that 1,500 meters per second? But that's your ballistic missile, the short-range tactical ballistic missile. Then you have the FP9, which is 855-kilometer range by the looks of it. Goes even faster, 2,200 meters per second. I presume that is. I can't read Ukrainian. Don't know what the 70-kilometer thing is, though, but I presume that it's got a 20-meter circle error probable. It's got an 800-kilogram warhead, so that's like almost double the Iskander. So if I'm correct in that, that is huge, right? And I don't know what this is. Yeah, so I don't know what a couple of those figures pertain to. If anyone can do a screen grab of that and then put it into Google Lens or something and translate that, that would be fantastic. I think that's accurate from what I said. So anyway, those are the 5-point drones and missiles, and we are looking forward to Flamingos being made at scale. Some claims are that they're making at least 3 at the moment a day. And then obviously the FP7s are going to be, I think, used by the end of the year, codified by the end of the year, but I assume they'll be using them pretty soon. The FP9s look to be a bit further behind. They are much bigger and much longer ranged. And that's all pretty exciting. So anyway, those are based on the S300, S400 system. Now, I wonder if they are going to be building air defense systems. Then if they're building these FP7s and they are effectively surface-to-air missiles used in ground attack mode, then I've been wondering about this for some time. When are they going to start building their own air defense systems? They need to be able to build their own to replace all of the old systems that are going to be attrited away, whether it be the books or the OSAs or the S300s themselves that they have. Okay. Ukraine has started using the SAPSAN missile, as we know, operational tactical missile system equipped with the ballistic missiles. This is the Hrym 2. There were many moments when our enemies thought they're going to use the Neptune cruise missiles, let them try. Today, Ukraine is already using cruise missiles, Neptune, Panancirs, Flamingos. The Panancir is like I think a hybrid drone missile, and the ballistic missile system SAPSAN. I won't comment on the numbers. I don't want our enemies to know all the details. The Neptunes are really working well. So using Neptunes, they've used them to strike recently at, say, Novorossiysk, Tuapse, I think. Neptunes were used there among many other places. But he said at this time, and I've talked to you about this before, he said that they have used these other systems, but they're not going to say when and how many. But that's really good news. That means that they are using ballistic missiles already. Fantastic. Now, anti-Shahed General Churishina bullet has been codified. Another interceptor drone here. Completed codification has been approved for use. It's already effectively countering enemy Shaheds and Shed type Garans. I think I've talked about this previously, maybe in hits and losses, but also there's another one, and they all look fairly similar. They're going off what I think was originally a Wild Hornets drone, which is the Sting, they call it, I think. Very similar, all of these drones, they seem to be. And you've got some stats on this drone down there. Is that 20-kilometer range? That would be pretty useful if it has operational range. Or is it 6 kilometers? I don't know. Maybe it can acquire the target 20 kilometers away and it's got a range of 6 kilometers. I don't know. I don't speak Ukrainian. But then you've got this other one, the TFL anti-Shahed drone module, which automatically directs the interceptor to Shahed type drones. So it's a module. So maybe that gets fixed to any other drone. The system autonomously detects a drone in a thermal image, analyzing the object's movement, its thermal signature, and other parameters using AI. So this is really good. Obviously, it allows drones, or this drone is able to autonomously detect a drone like a Shahed or Garan and analyze its movement, its thermal signature, and other parameters using AI, and then target it. I showed you the other day in a hits and losses video, but this is a military aid video, that the Ukrainians have developed on a Baba Yaga drone. So you can see the Baba Yaga drone just at the top there. It emits this massive light, blast, and it blinds, in this case, the FPV drone looking for the Baba Yaga. And I presume the Baba Yaga, this large bomber drone, then goes probably upwards, and this FPV drone is searching around for it, and allows that really valuable Baba Yaga bomber drone to get out of dodge, fly upwards, get out there, get back to base, and the FPV drone is blinded temporarily. So it's not a permanent device there or defense, but it allows the drone to get out of dodge, at least for a wee while. Ukraine just found out a way to make soldiers invisible to night drones without paying $2,000 for Western gear. Ukrainian firm STG Defense has developed the Chuhatsia Gen 2 thermal blanket using nylon embedded with silver crystals. The result, thermal visibility to a Mavic 3T, similar to the surroundings. We've seen a lot of Russians use thermal blankets and stuff, but then they still stick out because they still look firmly different from the, it covers their heat, but then it looks, I think, colder maybe than the surrounding areas, and you can still see them. Many videos of people in thermal blankets either standing still and expecting not to be hit and getting hit, or like moving through fields and getting hit. Anyway, that's crucial because cheap blankets actually make soldiers easier to spot. They show up as cold, there you go, as cold black shapes on infrared cameras. Troops trapped in Mernograd trying to escape through a drone-filled corridor could use this tech now, so that could be useful. Ukraine wants to restart weapons exports, a potential $2 billion boost for its defense industry, but the system to make it happen doesn't exist yet. So Euromaidan Press has a piece saying, here's what needs to change. I'm not going to go through that just for reasons of time. And Ukraine has blown up the old economics of war dogma, says Timothy Milovanov. Financial Times reports Russia has spent more, had more industry, but failed to convert scale to victory, while Ukraine used reforms, macro stability, and innovation with the EU aid to hold a much larger aggressor back for 4 years. Russia, nearly 19% of Ukraine is occupied, only about 3,000 square kilometers gained in 2025, scattered, operationally weak, and bought with massive casualties. Ukraine, the GDP fell 29% in 2022, back to growth in 23 and 24. Defense nearly 65 billion, 34% of GDP, versus Russia, 149 billion, 7.1% of GDP. There's a key asymmetry here, and that's in institutions. Pre-war reforms from 2014 to 2022, the MBU cleanup, inflation targeting, banking sector purge, digitalized public finance, naphtha gas restructuring, DIA, EU grid sync. So DIA is like the app that does everything for Ukraine. The EU grid sync in 2022, and it's let Ukraine absorb huge shocks instead of collapsing. So the war lesson, this is kind of in note form from Milovanov of the article. The war lesson is that macro management equals combat power. So Ukraine has been able to withstand the Russian onslaughts, partly because of all the reforms and these institutional changes they've made that actually become kind of force multipliers. Stable banks, managed foreign exchange, better tax collection, more transparent spending, and functioning anti-corruption bodies, now being SAPO, give Ukraine fiscal and political space to innovate in drones, electronic warfare, agile brigades, and destruction-centric tactics. Allies are not equal. Ukraine receives advanced weapons, finance, and institutional anchoring from the US and the EU. Russia leans on China, Iran, North Korea on transactional high-cost terms that deepen its dependency without giving it comparable tech or institutional upgrades. EU's defense maths is supporting Ukraine is cheap insurance. EU defense spending is roughly 343 billion euros, 1.9% of GDP, rising to approximately 2.1%. aid to Ukraine is more than 300 billion euros, including nearly 187 billion from the EU, far less than a full European war would cost. A proposed 210 billion euro reparations loan could underwrite Ukraine's defense without Europe's security. For Europe, Ukraine is not just a recipient, it's a model: fast, decentralized, SME-driven defense ecosystems, short feedback loops from the front to R&D, and treating digital, cyber, and logistics as core weapons systems show how to rebuild a modern European deterrent with less bureaucracy. The endgame vision is a rebalanced NATO. If Europe with Ukraine can independently deter a weakened Russia, Article 5 becomes a backstop, not a main pillar. The center of gravity shifts to European capabilities, interoperability, and joint planning, with US support but not dependence. So that's interesting as a kind of note form analysis of that financial, or summary of that Financial Times article. And Europe is providing Ukraine with an awful lot. Ukraine is using their institutional reforms and the way they do things to their advantage, and they are eking out that advantage against Russia that has a much bigger potential but doesn't use its heft efficiently and effectively enough. And so that just translates into large meat attacks, but when they do produce a lot of drones, often the drones aren't as good as the Ukrainian drones. The innovation isn't there, the feedback loops from the front line aren't taken on board, or they don't exist in the way they do in Ukraine, so on and so forth. So there is an asymmetry there, but Ukraine is able to prevail despite that asymmetry. Okay. Finally, Ukraine will disband international legions. Foreign fighters will be reassigned to Ukrainian assault units and serve at least through the end of 2025, the General Staff says, according to BBC. The move integrates international volunteers into regular frontline formations as part of force restructuring. So individual international legions will be, I think, they will be subsumed by each groups. A bit like I interviewed James from Why in Ukraine, who's now he was in the International Legion. He's now in an international unit within the Azov 3rd, no, Azov 12th. Well, anyway, within Azov, I can't remember which brigade. Now, some are saying that this is somewhat controversial and they might see fewer international signups as a result of this. Others are obviously saying it's got its advantages. I would need to look into the finer details of this. Someone says that doesn't sound like a positive move for fighters from the International Legion. There are loads of criticisms of the International Legion, though, and it certainly used to be very poorly organized, trained, and commanded. So I guess it's subsuming it into the new core structure, with the hope that it will be these fighters will be just better, and the system will be better. But there are detractors of this as well. So I don't know the full details, just letting you know something like that is happening. Right, moving on to the final section of this stream. I told you it's a bumper one, and we're going to be talking about Russian aid and whatnot. I just want to give some more props to people who are supporting the channels. Thank you very much. R. Evans, we appreciate you, buddy. No, I appreciate you. Thank you. Without you guys, I wouldn't be able to do what I do. So thank you. Seb Carter gifting 5 ATP Geopolitics membership. Thanks, mate. Really appreciate that. And Hoagie as well. Thank you. Often helps through buy me a coffee. So thank you, Hoagie, gifting 10 ATP Geopolitics memberships. That's super, super generous. Ignis of the Flame. Yeah, I think that's right. When they're all one word, I sometimes get it all wrong. Drone swarms are going to be so scary. That is true. Thank you for the super chat. Yes, I think so. Mitch Mazarol's a superb supporter of the channel and my other channel as well. Thank you. Not that's just gathering cobwebs at the moment. Speaking of military aid, why not put in a plug for the drone lab that James is heading up? YouTube super chat won't let me post the link, so I'd ask the mods to make that happen. Thanks. Yes. Now, I would have to find the link again, which Ukraine has, whyukraine.com. He did appeal for this. Yeah, whyukraine.com. I'll see if I can find his. Yeah, here it is. Right. So James from whyukraine.com, that interview with him is an absolute must watch. It's from about, well, I did it like 2 weeks ago now, but it took 11 days, 12 days for them to give permission for that to go live. That is a really good interview. Please check that out. If you go to whyukraine.com, that's the letter Y, Ukraine.com, it will take you to his landing page that then you can go to support Azov and the work that they do. So yeah, that's really worthwhile, as well as our own fundraiser. So thank you for reminding me of that, Mitch. You are a total legend. Okay. And as Benny Pie says, just a reminder to subscribe, click the bell and select all instead of personalized. So thank you for that, Benny Pie, for that reminder. Okay, right. I am now I'm going to have to sort of race through this because I think I better go and spend some time with my missus because it's clear that the film is finished. Kirilo Shevchenko on the Russian side of things says Russia has poured $540 billion into its war machine since 2022, and spending hits new records. In January to September 2025 alone, military outlays hit 135 to 140 billion dollars. That's 44% of all federal tax revenues and nearly 40% of total budget spending. Compared to pre-war 2021, military costs are almost 4 times higher. This is a deep fiscal imbalance. Sustained war financing is crowding out investment in healthcare, education, and regional development, steadily eroding the living standards of Russian taxpayers. I mean, it is an absolute shocker what's going on in Russia, but they are spending an awful lot on the war, and that is all being spent to kill Ukrainians. Right, so you know, Ukraine need their own sort of funding, and what they are relying on, as we saw earlier, is innovating and having institutional reforms. That means they can do more with the money they do have. The Russian military received a new batch of Su-34 fighter bombers. These jets carry glide bombs for which Ukraine currently has no comprehensive defense. So the Euromaidan Press article, this is an interesting one. Russia received a new batch of Su-34 bombers, the same aircraft that dropped 860 bombs on Pokrovsk in a single month. Wow. Russia's Su-34 bomber fleet grows larger as Ukraine still has no solution against guided glide bombs. However, we don't know how many they have been provided, and how many they are producing. So in 2025, Russia planned to produce 75,000 aerial guided glide bombs. In October, Moscow dropped 150 bombs in one day on Pokrovsk. And in October, they dropped 860 bombs weighing 250 kilograms on the city of Pokrovsk. That is how much of a problem these things are. They've extended the range potentially to 200 kilometers for their guided glide bombs. I don't know whether that's a regular thing, but that is also an added challenge. So, as usual, Russian officials did not reveal the number of aircraft and only released a short video. So there could be a lot of smoke and mirrors here, but they claim a batch has gone to the Russian VKS. Visual indicators suggest that the latest batch contains at least several newly manufactured Su-34s. Several would mean what? 2, 3, 4, 5? I don't know. United Aircraft Corporation Director Vadim Badeha said in 2025 production program is almost complete and work on aircraft scheduled for 2026 has already begun. He noted that this is one of the most intense years for deliveries of operational and tactical aviation. But we just don't know how many they produce a year or how many this batch got, other than that several Su-34s are delivered. So if you're being as charitable to Ukraine as possible, then this could be not a lot and could be overblown. Or if you're dooming, it's like this is a bit of a problem. Right, Tadragami says, analysis, new data suggests Russia is sustaining its Mi-8 helicopter output despite wartime losses. According to non-public Russian procurement documents obtained and analyzed by Front Intelligence Insight Team, current Mi-8 production appears to be sufficient to offset their wartime losses. Since the Soviet era, more than 12,000 of these of all types have been produced. It's a versatile military transport platform that can move troops, cargo, and serve as a flying hospital or electronic warfare asset, and conduct attack missions with unguided rockets or even bombs. Correspondence between Aviafarm and ZOMZ, the Defense Ministry, and ZOMZ show a request for 40 IS-264A thermometers, 20 for Kazan and 20 for Ulan Uda, where Mi-8s are produced. So I guess if you're ordering a number of certain components, then one would assume that if you're ordering 40 thermometers, then you're going to get 40 helicopters. Each helicopter, or actually not so much, 20 helicopters. Each helicopter requires 2 of these units, meaning that at least 20 Mi-8s were being built for the Defense Ministry in 2025 based on this order alone. These figures refer only to Mi-8 helicopters built for the Defense Ministry, not those supplied to other federal agencies. So the Defense Ministry is not the only customer. In 2024, the State Transport Leasing Company received 40 Mi-8 MTV-1 helicopters. If GTLK alone took delivery of 40 aircraft in a single year, it suggests Russian helicopter plants can produce at least 40 annually. Since the beginning of the war, Russia has destroyed or damaged 48 Mi-8 helicopters and 6 Mi-8 MTPR-1 electronic warfare helicopters, totaling about 54 Mi-8 helicopters in the course of 45 months. Taking the confirmed 54 losses and adding 20% to account for unreported incidents and wear brings the total to about 65. Over 2024 to 2025, even the conservative output of 20 helicopters per year for the MOD would cover more than half of all wartime losses. Russia's defense ministry appears to be targeting high production output levels, both in tanks and helicopters, potentially enough to replace a full year's wartime helicopter losses in a few years. Mi-8 helicopters have limited battlefield use due to dense air defenses, yet Moscow still dedicates substantial resources to their production. This leads to conclude that Russia is unlikely to slow defense manufacturing in 2026, even if diplomatic negotiations advance. So they're saying that they can replace the losses in Mi-8s if their conclusions are correct. Right, Intel, as in the company Intel, and AMD, microprocessors and whatnot, and Texas Instruments are being sued in Texas by Ukrainian civilians who claim the chip makers failed to prevent their components from ending up in Russian missiles and drones used in attack on civilians. This is brilliant. We need to see more of this. How to stop them is suing them. Intel AMD focused on failing to block chips in Russian missiles. The lawsuits accuse Intel, Advanced Micro Devices, and Texas Instruments of willful ignorance, alleging their chips were illegally resold through intermediaries and used in weapons, including cruise missiles, Iranian-made drones, and Iskander missiles. That needs to happen prompto. A new investigation reveals a Dubai-based Russian entrepreneur uses a Hong Kong company to move European electronics into Russia. The shipments include high-end oscilloscopes and signal generators used in radars and electronic warfare. Again, loopholes need to be closed, big time. Right, The Economist readers found out a month ago, says Oliver Carroll, in response to someone else saying Russia signed up 403,000 recruits this year. Well, actually, this was reported some time back by The Economist, that said Z bloggers also stop short of criticizing the Kremlin's war aims. On the contrary, many are pushing Mr. Putin to double down and initiate a second round of conscription, some writing that a victory will be impossible without it. A source in Ukrainian military intelligence suggests that Russia has the resources to pin Ukraine back throughout 2026 using only voluntary recruitment. This year's recruitment drive is on course to meet its target of 403,000 soldiers, only slightly down from 420,000 in 2024. Some regions will underfill the plan, others will overfill, the source says. The Kremlin is losing many men in its bloody push for the rest of Donetsk, but recruitment numbers are running at roughly twice the level of losses. Well, it makes you wonder, though, if they're needing 403,000 this year and had 420,000 last year, whether that is twice the losses, because, I don't know. But anyway, that's a worry that they are actually recruiting a serious number of people. Russia signed up 403,000 recruits this year, surpassing the initial plan for 2025. Krilo Budanov, the intelligence chief, said. It is also tapping a growing pool of reservists to replenish its ranks and doling out financial incentives that lure men from hardship, from hard scrabble provinces. So that's certainly a challenge. It's not needing to render these tabs. Russia launched mercenary recruitment in Iran, offering $20,000 signing on bonus and $2,000 monthly via Telegram, targeting economically vulnerable populations as part of a campaign that recruited 18,000 foreigners from 128 countries, Ukraine's Disinformation Center reports. this is, I keep warning about this. Honestly, Russia has a massive advantage in terms of being able to attracting all of these fighters from all over the world, attracted by social mobility, by serious money that for them is a huge uptick in what they would be otherwise able to earn. This is such a challenge. 18,000 foreigners from 128 countries, according to Ukraine's disinformation center. That's 18,000 extra people that Ukrainians have to kill. And then Russia is getting help, serious help from China, certainly in terms of fiber optic drone, fiber optics just generally. This is what Ukraine is up against with respect to fiber optic FPVs. The Chinese-Russian collaboration PGI Technologies has this installation of high-speed fiber optic cable winding machines. 2 shifts produce 1,200 coils per shifts. That is 36,000 coils per month. 36,000 drones, fiber optic drones, can be produced, assuming that all of these coils get used on drones. That is a single Russian Chinese setup there. 36,000 coils per month. That is over 1,000 fiber optic drones per day if all of these turn into drones being used by Russia. Huge challenge. Russia is in discussions with India to localize production of Russian drones such as Lancets, Garans, Shahid-type drones. Sergei Chemezov, head of Rostec Corporation, has said, quote, "They are ready to produce them," he said. Also, according to Russian military blogger War Gonzo, on December the 5th, a delegation of the Smolensk FPV drone piloting center arrived in India to complete objectives within the framework of Russian-Indian strategic partnership. Again, alarm bells should be going. India is reportedly set to help Russia produce drones that could be used against Ukraine. Moscow is offering tech transfers and battlefield experience in return. A delegation from Russia's FPV drone center visited India with Putin, signaling deepening defense ties. Modi called Russia a true friend. Alarm bells, alarm bells, alarm bells. And Russians are now equipping Shahed drones with 2 warheads weighing 100 kilograms. Is that 100 kilograms each? Because they were up to 90 kilograms. So I presume that is 2 warheads of 100 kilograms. Does that mean 200 kilograms? Or are we moving more formally from the claim that they had moved from 40 kilograms to 90 kilograms? Is this now two warheads totaling 100 kilograms? I'd like to know, because if it's moving to 200 kilograms, so somebody's here saying, well, that's a 20 kilogram. Actually, I'd say if it's 100 kilograms, then it's only a 10 kilogram increase. But if it's saying, if that's 200 kilograms, then that's massive. That's effectively a 200 kilogram cruise missile, really. And hundreds of them being released on a nightly basis. If it's 100 kilograms, then that's a 10 kilogram increase, which is still a problem. We're moving steadily further and up to from 40 kilograms to 90 kilograms and 90 kilograms now to 100 kilograms. And if you're having nights where 500 of these bad boys are flying into Ukraine, then that's essentially like 500 cruise missiles, really. That is okay. A lot of these are decoys and reconnaissance drones and whatever. But the TLDR of this is Russia is producing bigger warhead Shahed, one-way attack drones at scales that are frightening, and they are just sending umpteen of these into Ukraine every single night. Ukraine needs to do what I have been saying and what Andrew Perpetua said earlier, and together with allies, outproduce Russia in terms of drones, one-way attack drones, strike drones, and cruise missiles and ballistic missiles. Get it done now, yesterday. Russia spent 2 decades failing to repair a nuclear submarine, but now they're leasing that nuclear submarine to India for $2 billion. Moscow is selling off high-tech weapons it can no longer maintain to fund low-tech warfare in Ukraine. That is a problem as well. Alarm bells should be going off as to the relationship between Russia and India at the moment in terms of tech. The analyst says Russia leases a Victor 3 SSN, so this is a submarine, to India for $2 billion. It's not the first time the Indians have leased Russian subs. They learn how they're made and operate and then build their own. However, this submarine was built in 1989. It's been in unfinished repair since 2003 and is considered utterly obsolete. It's bizarre. Although bizarre as it may seem, they're exporting S-400s to Iran along with what appears to be an export version of the Su-47, a pair of those. That's how desperate they are for cash. So how you should understand this is getting certain things to Iran for cash and then getting this obsolete submarine leased that's not even been finished or repaired, leased by India, is a way of getting money back into Russia. $2 billion for India to look at the tech on this old sub is basically, this is an indicator of how desperate Russia is for money. So then you're wondering, well, what are they going to do with India with regard to all those drones that they're going to manufacture? Like, what are they giving India? Is it just tech? Are they giving India tech? So this is what they've done maybe with North Korea as well. They just don't have the money, Russia. So the analyst says they'd rather sell abroad than use the systems themselves. They're probably less effective anyway. So yeah, I think that's just an interesting reflection of economically where Russia are at. Right, that's enough from me. I need to go and have another blackberry gin or something with my missus. Right, interesting. So I never know how to pronounce these names. Ombidu El Dekut. Am I saying that wrong? I thought, anyway, Paul Sweeney. I thought India was annoyed because they hadn't received the S-400s that were promised. Yeah, and yet they're still promising more. So I don't know what is going on there. I have to look into that. It is bartering, isn't it? Yeah, I know it's Paul Sweeney. Yeah, just Paul. Much easier. Okay, just a few more bits and pieces from you guys. Thanks for Benny Pie for being in the live chat and putting some questions to me that people have asked and some statements. Here we have, remember, the Ukrainians were the intelligent and creative Soviets, unlike those further north, making aircraft carriers, T-80s, nuclear missiles and aircraft. So yeah, Ukraine can rely on that heritage that they have, and that gives them a bit of an advantage. But the Russians, they have just, of course, decent defense innovation as well. We shouldn't always assume the worst of the Russians. In Belgrade, a plume of smoke rose after a hit near the Luk thermal plant. Oh, again, a result of Kharkivska Gora and other areas of the city report. Residents, report power outages. So that's good news. I haven't looked at any news coming out at the moment with regard to strikes that might be taking place. Hey, good to have JR. JR, I hope you're well. I know you've not been very well with health issues at the back and whatnot. Thermal blankets provide a temporary reduction in heat loss, but the energy still has to be dissipated over time to maintain thermal equilibrium. Yeah, you're not storing that heat. So yeah, it would have to escape somehow. Yeah, that's well worth taking on board. And the pirate, thank you for some Norwegian love here. Please hit the like and subscribe and share. Also share on Blue Sky so JP gets to 100,000 subscribers. It is something I want, as I keep saying, not really for my own benefit. I mean, essentially, if you watch enough of my videos without subscribing, the algorithm is still going to throw these videos out to you. But I do also desperately just want to get a plaque from YouTube for 100,000 subscribers so that Oscar likes me a bit more and respects me a bit more. One of my sons, one of my twins. So please help out there. Anyway, Benny Pie, please follow ATPGEO on social media. They're all linked now in the descriptions of all the videos. So Benny Pie's been amazing. He's getting these automated things that post everything out to. So please follow ATPGEO. If you search for ATPGEO on Facebook, it's called ATP Geopolitics, actually. Instagram, ATPGEO. Threads, ATPGEO. Twitter, ATPGEO. Blue Sky, ATPGEO. I have my own personal Blue Sky and Twitter as well. Telegram, ATPGEO. Discord, links in the description, and soon to be on Reddit are ATPGEO. So we are taking over the social. We're not really. It's just you can go and chat there and share videos there. But yeah, it's all Benny Pie just really helping out with the channel, and he's super cool in that respect. Anyway, thank you very, very much to all the mods. You are legends. ATP, just to remind people, is short for A Tippling Philosopher. I started going, my mate Rob, who has been on my other channel a number of times, I don't know if he's been on this channel. I have another channel called A Tippling Philosopher, and I had a blog, and then I wrote under the moniker of A Tippling Philosopher in a number of different places. I was employed for a little bit by Only Sky Media. It was a startup non-religious media representation company, although it's kind of went under and it's been resurrected a little now in a slightly different form. But all of my, I've got like 5,000 articles of different lengths and blogs and feature articles. They are now all housed at my, is it atippingphilosopher.com, Benny? Anyway, that's linked below. But yeah, Atippling Philosopher, me and my mates used to go down a pub once a month and pick a subject, and we used to debate the crap out of it quite formally, go around, have our tuppence on it, and then someone would be presenting it, and we'd be drinking pints whilst debating like Taoism or resurrection or, you know, morality or whatever. So Atippling Philosopher then became ATP, and I started up a geopolitics channel alongside my philosophy channel, which is Atippling Philosopher. And I was like, well, let's just call it ATP Geopolitics. And I like to think occasionally I still tipple and philosophize. It doesn't stand for a terrific person, but you know, maybe in that'd be nice. I'm not so conceited to claim that. So yes, indeed, A Tippling Philosopher. Thank you all to all of the people in the live chat for being awesome. Slava Ukraini, check out my content. Will be coming out tomorrow, just as it has done today and every day. I really appreciate all of you, and I'm sorry to do a quick ending here and rush off, but I want to go and see my missus. I haven't seen her enough. So yeah, thank you, take care, and hopefully this was all of use and informative. Slava Ukraini, Slava.